a pie, a porch, a man who had forgotten how to expect good things, a horse the color of a thundercloud, standing in the corner of a round pen with its ears flat and its eyes full of ancient grievance, a saddle, tooled leather, silver conchos, the best thing he owned, sitting on a rail in the morning light, and a woman who already knew how the day was going to end, even if he didn't. That is where this story is going. But to understand what the saddle meant when it changed hands, you have to understand the man who was so certain it never would. His name was Caleb Horne, and he had been certain about a great many things over the course of his 51 years, and he had been wrong about most of the ones that mattered. He was wrong about the winter of '89, which he had called mild in October, and which buried 3 of his cattle by December. He was wrong about the east fence, which he had called sound, and which fell in a windstorm 2 springs later. He was wrong about his own constitution, which he had called iron, and which a bout of pneumonia had quietly revised to something more like well-seasoned oak, still standing, but with a few soft places you had to know to avoid. He had been wrong, too, about his wife, Margaret, but in the opposite direction. He had called her stubborn and impractical when she planted the kitchen garden, and she had fed them on it for 19 years. He had called her optimistic to a fault when she befriended every stray animal and wandering soul that came through Harlan County, and she had died with more people at her graveside than the church could properly hold. He had called her irreplaceable. On that one, he had been exactly right. That was 4 years ago now. 4 years since the house had become a place he lived in rather than a place he lived. He kept it well. He cooked adequately. He maintained the fences, the horses, the small herd of cattle he ran on the south pasture, and the professional respect of every rancher in the valley. He was known as a fair man, a capable man, a man whose word was good and whose handshake closed a deal. He was also known, more quietly, as a man who had gone a little still. Not sad, exactly. Still. The way a creek goes still when it freezes. There is water moving underneath, but you wouldn't know it to look at the surface, and nobody thought it was their business to check. He had a dog named Biscuit, who was old and fat and had the philosophical disposition of someone who has seen everything twice and found it mostly acceptable. Biscuit slept near the stove in winter and near the porch steps in summer, and observed the affairs of the ranch with the mild, unhurried attention of a retired judge. Caleb talked to Biscuit sometimes, in the evenings, when the quiet got to a particular pitch that required some kind of sound to balance it. Biscuit listened without comment, which Caleb found more useful than most conversations. The horse came in September. A rancher 2 counties over had acquired it in a trade he had immediately regretted. A blue roan stallion, 4 years old, with the build of something magnificent and the manners of a grievance made flesh. The horse had thrown 3 men and refused 4 more. It had not been mistreated, as far as anyone could tell. It was simply, constitutionally, opposed to the entire project of being ridden. The rancher, whose name was Aldous Peck, brought it to Caleb because Caleb had a reputation for difficult horses, and because Aldous Peck was a practical man who knew when a problem was above his pay grade. Caleb looked at the horse for a long time. The horse looked back at him with the specific expression of an animal that has already won every argument it has ever been in, and sees no reason to expect this one to be different. Caleb named him Slate because of the color, and because the name felt like something you could write on and wipe clean. He put Slate in the round pen and watched him move. The horse was extraordinary. That was the trouble. If he had been merely difficult, Caleb would have known what to do. But Slate moved like something out of a painting. That particular, terrible grace that makes a man feel he is witnessing something that doesn't belong to him, something he can admire but perhaps not own. Caleb watched him for 20 minutes without moving, and then he went inside and ate his supper and told Biscuit that the horse was going to be a problem. Biscuit opened one eye and closed it again, which Caleb interpreted as agreement, the slow, methodical building of a language between a man and an animal that doesn't want to speak to him. He made progress, not enough. Slate would accept the halter, would lead, would stand to be groomed with only the occasional theatrical attempt to relocate Caleb's shoulder from his body. But the moment any weight came near his back, the horse became a different creature entirely. All that grace converted instantly into something that wanted to be somewhere else, badly, and was willing to rearrange the landscape to get there. It was during this period that the town began to talk about the woman. Her name was Nora Vass. She had come to Harlan County from somewhere east, not the soft east, people said, but the working east. The kind of East where a woman learns things that aren't considered women's work because there isn't anyone else to learn them. She was 34. She had taken a lease on the old Briarley place, which had been empty 2 years and which everyone agreed was a project, by which they meant it was a wreck, by which they meant they were curious to see what she'd do with it. She had arrived in June with a wagon, a mule named Patience, and a way of looking at things that made people feel she was measuring them for something without being unfriendly about it. She fixed the Briarley roof herself, in July, in the heat, with a matter-of-factness that the town found simultaneously admirable and slightly unsettling. The way you feel when someone does a thing you believed required 2 people and does it alone without apparent effort. She came to Caleb's place on a Thursday in October, which was the day she always came to buy hay, because she had not yet put up enough of her own. This was their 4th transaction. They had established over the course of those 4 Thursdays a tidy and efficient exchange. She paid a fair price. She loaded her own wagon. She thanked him plainly and left. Caleb respected this. He had been doing business with people who wanted to talk about the weather and the state of their cousins' marriages for 30 years, and the woman's directness was, he thought, a professional virtue. He did not think about her between Thursdays. He told himself this was true. He told himself this with the particular confidence of a man who has not examined the claim closely enough to notice the holes in it. On the 4th Thursday, she paused by the round pen on her way out. Slate was in there, doing his thing, which was being magnificent and furious and entirely himself. She watched for a moment. Caleb, who had been watching her watch the horse with an expression he was not fully aware of, said, from the fence post where he was leaning, that the horse was not her concern. He said it pleasantly. He said it the way you say a thing when you mean it but don't want to sound like you mean it quite that much. She said, without looking at him, that she wasn't concerned. She was interested. There was a difference, she said. He said he'd had 3 good hands try that horse and none of them had managed a clean ride. She said she could see why. She said it like she was reading something off the horse that he hadn't noticed was written there. He said, because the moment seemed to call for something definitive, and because he was a man who had been certain about things his whole life and had not yet fully learned the cost of that certainty. He said, no woman breaks that horse. He said it without thinking. He said it the way you say something you believe to be a plain fact, a simple observation, a thing so obvious it barely requires stating. He was not, he would tell himself later, being unkind. He was being, he told himself, realistic. She turned and looked at him then, for the first time in the conversation. She had gray eyes, the particular gray of weather coming in from the west, and she looked at him with an expression that was not quite amusement and not quite something else, but was somewhere in the middle of both. And she said, then you'll owe me your best saddle by sundown. She said it like a joke. She said it lightly, the way you toss a coin to see which way it lands. She said it, and then she walked to her wagon and clicked to Patience and drove out of his yard without looking back. And Caleb stood by the round pen fence and watched her go and felt, for the first time in 4 years, like someone had opened a window in a room he had forgotten was closed. He told himself that feeling was irritation. He was wrong about that too. She came back the next morning. He was at the round pen with his coffee when he heard the wagon, and he felt something happen in the region of his chest that he catalogued immediately as surprise, and filed away without examining further. She unhitched Patience, tied her to the post, and walked to the round pen fence and looked at Slate the way she had the day before. That same unhurried, measuring look, like she was having a conversation with the horse in a language Caleb didn't speak yet. She didn't ask permission. She didn't explain herself. She simply climbed the fence and went in. Caleb opened his mouth. He closed it. He watched. What she did in that round pen over the next 2 hours was not magic, exactly, but it was the kind of thing that looks like magic to someone who has been doing something one way for 30 years and has never seen it done another way. She moved slowly. She moved with a patience that was not passive but active, the patience of someone who has decided that time is not the enemy and is willing to prove it. She let the horse come to her terms, and her terms were quiet and consistent and absolutely without apology. She did not push. She did not retreat. She simply remained, in the round pen with the horse, as though she had all the time in the world and had decided to spend some of it here. The lead circled. Slate tossed his head. Slate did the full repertoire of things he had done to discourage the previous 4 men, and Nora Vass received each of them with the same calm attention she might give to a piece of weather, acknowledging it, waiting for it to pass, continuing. Caleb stood at the fence and did not move. Biscuit came and sat beside him and also did not move. Neither of them spoke, which was unusual for Caleb and entirely normal for Biscuit. By mid-morning, Slate was following her, not because he had been forced to, because she had made it the most comfortable option, and because horses, like most creatures, will eventually choose comfort over grievance if you give them enough time and enough reason. By early afternoon, she had a hand on his neck. By the time the light began to go golden and long across the pasture, she had her weight across his back, draped over him sideways, easy and unhurried. And Slate stood there with his ears uncertain but his feet still, and Caleb Horne stood at the fence and felt something he had not felt in 4 years, which was the specific sensation of the world being larger than he had recently been allowing for. She didn't ride him, not that day. She didn't need to. She had made her point with a precision that did not require elaboration. She climbed out of the round pen, dusted her hands on her trousers, and looked at Caleb with those gray eyes and said nothing. He said nothing. Then, because he was an honest man, and because his word was good, and because the saddle was sitting on the rail in the afternoon light exactly where it had been that morning, he walked to the rail and picked it up and held it out to her. She looked at the saddle. She looked at him. She said she had been joking about the saddle. He said he knew. He said he wasn't. She took it. Their hands were both on it for a moment, the leather between them, and neither of them moved, and Biscuit, who had followed Caleb to the rail, made a small sound that was not quite a word but was, in its way, an opinion. Caleb did not look at the dog. He looked at Nora Vass, and she looked at him, and the mountains did what they always did, which was stand there and hold the light and not say anything, which was, in the circumstances, the right thing to do. She came back the following Thursday for hay, as usual, and the Thursday after that, and the one after that. The saddle transaction was not mentioned again, but it was present in every exchange the way a thing you have both agreed to remember is present, not spoken of, not forgotten, just there. The way a good foundation is there under a house you live in without thinking about it. She finished with Slate over the course of 3 more sessions. The horse, by the end, was not broken in the old sense of the word. He was more like translated. He had been given a language he could live in, and he had chosen to use it. Caleb watched all 3 sessions from the fence. He told himself he was watching the horse. He was wrong about that. The town noticed, because the town always notices. Harlan County was not a large place, and a woman coming to the Horne Ranch every Thursday, and also on several non-Thursday occasions, was the kind of fact that a community absorbs and processes the way it absorbs and processes all facts, collectively, with enthusiasm and with a level of editorial embellishment that the original facts would not entirely recognize. Mrs. Alderton at the dry goods store said it was about time. She said this to everyone who came in for a week, as a kind of thesis statement, without specifying what it was time for, because she felt the what was obvious. Emmett Briggs, who ran the feed store and had known Caleb for 20 years, said he had a feeling, and when pressed to describe the feeling, said it was the kind you get when a thing you've been waiting for starts to happen. Aldous Peck, who had sold Caleb the horse in the first place, said he'd heard the woman was something, and said it with the satisfaction of a man who feels he has contributed to a situation he did not intend to contribute to. There was also, because there always is, a suitable alternative. His name was Gerald Marsh, and he was a prosperous man, prosperous in the way that Harlan County measured prosperity, which meant good land, good cattle, a sound house, and a manner that suggested he had never been surprised by anything and didn't intend to start. He was 47 and a widower of 2 years, and he had called on Nora Vass in August, before the hay business with Caleb had begun, and he had been received politely and had not been called on again. He bore this with the grace of a man who has enough other things going well, that a single setback does not define the season. He was not a villain. He was simply, as Nora had apparently concluded without making a production of it, a wrong answer to the question she was asking. Caleb did not know about Gerald Marsh's call until Emmett Briggs mentioned it in November. In the way that Emmett mentioned things, sideways, while doing something else, with the air of a man who is simply making conversation and definitely not delivering information he has been saving for the right moment. Caleb said he didn't see what that had to do with anything. Emmett said he didn't suppose it did. They talked about the price of winter feed for a while. Caleb drove home and thought about what Emmett had said, and told himself he was thinking about it because it was interesting from a general human nature perspective and not for any other reason. He thought about it while he fed the horses. He thought about it while he chopped wood for the evening. He thought about it while he made his supper, which was beans and cornbread, and the kind of meal a man makes when he is eating alone and has been eating alone long enough that he has stopped making it an occasion. He thought about it while he sat by the stove with Biscuit and the quiet settled in around him. The particular quiet of a house in winter when the wind is outside and you are inside and there is no one to tell the difference to. He thought about Margaret, which he did most evenings, but tonight the thinking had a different quality. Not the ache of absence, which he had learned to carry, but something more like a conversation. He thought about what Margaret would say if she were sitting across from him right now, in her chair, with her knitting or her book, watching him think himself in circles around something that was not actually complicated. She would say, he thought, that he was being a fool. She would say it fondly. She would say it the way she had said it every time he had talked himself into a corner over something that was actually quite simple, which was with the patience of a woman who had loved a slow thinker for 19 years and had found it on balance more endearing than frustrating. She would say, "Caleb Horne, you have been sitting in this chair deciding what you're not allowed to want for 3 months, and I would like you to stop." He sat with that for a while. Biscuit put his head on Caleb's knee. Caleb put his hand on Biscuit's head. Outside, the wind moved through the pine trees with a sound like something being said in another language that you almost understand. He did not talk himself into it that night. He was a slow thinker, and slow thinkers do not arrive at conclusions in a single evening. He arrived at it over the following 2 weeks, in increments, the way you cross a frozen creek, one careful step at a time, testing the ice, not because you are afraid, but because you are thorough, and because you have learned that the difference between courage and foolishness is mostly a matter of knowing where to put your feet. He thought about the saddle. He thought about her hands on the horse's neck. He thought about the way she had said, "I'm not concerned, I'm interested," like the distinction was important and she was someone who kept track of important distinctions. He thought about the round pen and the patience that was not passive, and the language she had made with an animal that had refused every other language offered to it. And he thought about how it was possible that a man could watch something like that and still tell himself it was just about the horse. It wasn't about the horse, he knew that now. He had known it for a while, if he was honest, which he was trying to be. He went to the Brierley place on a Tuesday, which was not a Thursday, which meant it was not about hay, which meant it was about something else, and they both knew it. She was in the yard when he arrived, mending a section of fence with the same matter-of-fact competence she brought to everything. And she looked up when he came through the gate and watched him cross the yard with an expression he couldn't quite read, which was unusual, because he had gotten fairly good at reading her expressions over the past months. He stood in front of her with his hat in his hands, literally his hat in his hands, because he had taken it off when he got down from the horse and had not put it back on, which was not something he did, and which she noticed, and which she did not comment on. He said, "I have been operating under a set of assumptions that need revision." She set down her fencing pliers. She waited. He said, "I told you no woman breaks that horse," he said. "I was wrong about the horse, and I was wrong about some other things, and I am not a man who says that easily, but I am a man who says it when it's true." He said, "I would like to call on you, if you're willing," he said, properly. He said it the way a man says a thing he has rehearsed and is saying exactly as rehearsed because he was afraid that if he left room to improvise, he would lose his nerve somewhere in the middle. She looked at him for a long moment. The wind moved through the yard. Patience, the mule, observed from the fence with the expression of an animal that has already known how this conversation ends and is simply waiting for the humans to catch up. Then Nora Vass said, "I was wondering how long that was going to take," he said. "I'm a slow thinker." She said, "I know." She said it the way you say something you have made peace with and decided is not a problem. She said it and picked up her fencing pliers again and said he could start by holding this post steady while she finished this section, if he wanted to make himself useful. He held the post. She finished the section. They worked together in the yard until the light went, and it was the most natural thing, and the most extraordinary thing, and both of those things were true at the same time, which is how the best things usually are. Now, here is where I want to pause for just a moment, because this is the part of the story where I always feel it most. That moment when a person finally stops arguing with their own good fortune and just lets it be true. If you're listening to this right now, wherever you are, on a drive somewhere, or winding down for the evening, or maybe just needing something warm to hold on to for a little while, I'm glad you're here. I mean that. If this story is sitting right with you, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're listening from. I love knowing where these stories end up. And stay with me just a little longer, because Caleb Horne is about to do the bravest thing he has ever done, and it is not what you'd expect from a man who once stood at a fence and said no woman breaks that horse. He called on her that Thursday, and the Thursday after, and by December there was no pretense that it was about hay, because she had put up her own hay by then, and they both knew the Thursday visits were their own thing now, separate from commerce, belonging to a category neither of them had named yet, but both of them recognized. He met her at church, which he had been attending with less regularity since Margaret died, and which he now attended with the specific punctuality of a man who has a reason to be somewhere on time. He sat beside her, which the town noted. Mrs. Alderton said it was about time again, and this time everybody knew what she meant. Gerald Marsh, when he heard, sent Caleb a note that said simply, "She's a fine woman. Treat her well." Caleb read it twice and wrote back, "I intend to." He meant it the way he meant all his words, which was completely. He asked her in February, on the porch of the Briarley place, which was no longer a wreck because she had spent the winter making it not a wreck, which was the kind of thing she did. He had brought her something, not flowers, which felt wrong, but a small thing he had made himself over the winter evenings, a repair to a bridle of hers that had needed work, done with care and some decorative tooling around the cheekpiece that he had spent longer on than he would admit. He gave it to her, and she turned it over in her hands and looked at the tooling, which was careful and not showy, and she looked up at him. He said, "I know this is not the conventional order of things," he said. "I know I am not the youngest man in this valley, or the most straightforward one," he said. "But I find that I would like to spend my Thursdays with you for the rest of my life, and also the other days of the week, and I am asking you plainly because that is the only way I know how to ask." She said yes. She said it simply, the way she said everything, without elaboration or performance. And then she said, "I said yes in October," he said. "October," she said. "When you handed me the saddle," she said. "I thought you understood." He thought about October. He thought about the saddle, and the leather between their hands, and the way neither of them had moved, and Biscuit's small sound that was not quite a word. He said, "I'm a slow thinker," she said. "I know," she said. "I waited," he said. "You knew," she said. "I knew." The mountains did what they always did. They were married in April, when the valley was coming green again, and the creek was running high with snowmelt, and the world had that particular quality it gets in spring, which is the quality of things beginning that have been waiting all winter for permission. The church was full, which would have surprised Caleb if he had thought about it, but he didn't think about it because he was looking at Nora, who was wearing a dress the color of the sky just after the blue deepens in the evening, and who was looking at him with those gray eyes that were not quite weather coming in from the west today, but were something else, something he didn't have a word for yet but had time to learn. Mrs. Alderton cried. Emmett Briggs looked satisfied in the way of a man whose feeling had been vindicated. Aldous Peck shook Caleb's hand and said he was glad the horse had worked out, and Caleb said he was too, and they were both talking about more than the horse, and they both knew it. Biscuit was not at the wedding, being a dog and not the sort of thing you bring to a church, but he was on the porch when they got home, and he lifted his head and looked at them both with the mild, unhurried attention of a retired judge reviewing a case he had already decided, and made a small sound that was not quite a word, and put his head back down. Caleb said to Nora that Biscuit approved. Nora said she was glad to have his endorsement. They went inside, into the house that was now a place he lived rather than just lived in. And the evening settled around them, and the stove was warm, and there was supper to make, and there were years ahead of them that neither of them could see yet, but both of them were ready for. Slate, for his part, became one of the finest working horses in Harlan County. He was never easy, exactly. He retained a quality of self-possession, a certain opinion about how things ought to go, that meant you always knew you were dealing with a creature who had a view and was capable of expressing it. But he was willing. He had found a language he could live in, and he used it, and Caleb rode him most mornings across the south pasture while the light came up over the mountains, and sometimes Nora rode beside him on her own horse. and they talked or they didn't talk, and both were fine. The saddle hung in the barn for a while. Then Nora put it on a rack in the tack room where it was easy to reach, and she used it when she worked Slate, which she did sometimes because she and the horse had an understanding that went back to that first afternoon in the round pen, and Slate remembered. Caleb watched her ride him sometimes and felt something that was not quite pride and not quite wonder, but was in the neighborhood of both, and he did not try to name it more precisely than that. He had learned by then that some things are better held than categorized. They had a son in the 2nd year and a daughter in the 4th, and the Briarley place, which they had kept and improved and which Nora ran as her own operation because she was that kind of woman, and Caleb was the kind of man who understood that, became a place people pointed to when they talked about what could be done with a piece of land and enough willingness. The children grew up between both places, which meant they grew up knowing the names of horses and the rhythm of seasons and the particular satisfaction of work done well by your own hands. The daughter, when she was 7, declared that she was going to be a horse trainer. Caleb said that sounded like a fine idea. Nora said nothing, but she was smiling. The real smile, the full one. Years later, many years, the kind that accumulate without your noticing until you look up and see where you are and realize the distance you have traveled. Their daughter came home from a neighboring ranch with a story about a horse nobody could ride. And she said she thought she could do it, and Caleb, who was sitting on the porch with Nora and a cup of coffee and the long light of an autumn evening, said, "Well," he said it slowly. He said it in the way of a man who has been wrong about things and knows it and has made his peace with it and is, on balance, grateful for every one of the mistakes that brought him here. He said, "I imagine you can." Nora looked at him over her coffee cup. He looked back at her. She said, quietly, so only he could hear, "Still owe me that saddle." He said, "You have the saddle." She said, "I know." She said, "I just like to remind you." He said, "I know you do." The evening held them. The mountains did what they always did. Somewhere in the barn, Slate moved in his stall with the particular sound of an old horse settling in for the night. And Biscuit's successor, a younger dog, same easy temperament, apparently a type, lay on the porch steps and breathed slowly in the cooling air. And the valley went quiet in the way it goes quiet in autumn, which is not the quiet of absence but the quiet of fullness, of a day that has been used well and is now resting. Now let me speak to you directly for a moment, because I have told a lot of stories in my time, and this is the one I keep coming back to when I try to understand a particular kind of mistake that good people make, and I think it is worth naming plainly. Caleb Horne's error was not cruelty. It was arithmetic. He had been doing a specific kind of calculation for 4 years, a calculation that went, "I am 51, and I have had my portion of good things, and the ledger is closed, and what remains is maintenance." He had looked at his life and measured it the way you measure a field, by what it has already yielded, rather than by what the soil still holds. He had confused the end of one chapter with the end of the book, and he had done it so thoroughly, so sincerely, so without drama, that he had almost made it true. There is a grain of real wisdom in that kind of caution. Loss is real. The particular shape of a life you have loved and lost does not come back. Margaret was Margaret, and there was no replacing her, and Caleb was right to know that. The mistake was not in honoring what he had lost. The mistake was in believing that honoring the past required closing the future. The mistake was in thinking that because one thing was finished, the capacity for that kind of thing was finished with it. He had measured the wrong dimension. He had looked at what was behind him and called it the total, when it was only the first part of the sum. The saddle was the tell, the best thing he owned, sitting on that rail in the morning light, and he had handed it over without hesitation the moment it was owed, because he was an honest man, and honest men pay what they owe. But he had not been honest with himself about what else he owed, what he owed to the years still ahead of him, to the woman who had already said yes in October and was waiting with the patience of someone who has made up her mind and is simply giving the other person time to catch up. He had been so busy being certain that he had missed the thing that was already true. I think about that a lot. I think about all the people who are standing at a fence somewhere, watching something extraordinary happen in a round pen, and telling themselves it isn't for them, it isn't their kind of thing. That particular gate is closed, that particular season is past. I think about the arithmetic they are doing, the careful, sincere, completely mistaken arithmetic that adds up to a life smaller than the one they are actually standing in. Don't let the arithmetic stop you. That is what I want to say to you, if you are somewhere in that calculation right now. Don't let the tally of what you have already spent convince you that you have nothing left to spend. Don't let the end of one chapter read as the end of the book. Don't stand at the fence and watch something magnificent happen and tell yourself it is not yours to reach for, because you have decided in advance how the story ends, and you have decided wrong. And the woman is already in the round pen, and she has already made up her mind, and she is waiting for you to catch up. The best things, in my experience, and I have told enough of these stories to have a view, the best things don't announce themselves. They arrive on a Thursday, for hay, and they look at a horse with gray eyes and say, "I'm not concerned, I'm interested," and they wait, with that active, unhurried patience, for you to understand the difference. Caleb Horne figured it out. It took him longer than it needed to, but he got there, hat in hand, on a Tuesday that was not a Thursday, and he said the truest thing he had ever said. I have been operating under a set of assumptions that need revision, and the rest of his life opened up in front of him like a valley in spring, like a field that still had everything in the soil, like a story that had not in fact been finished at all. Go and do likewise. Take off the hat, walk across the yard, say the true thing plainly, because that is the only way to say it. Thank you for spending this time with me tonight. I know your time is valuable, and I do not take it lightly that you chose to spend some of it here, with Caleb and Nora and a blue roan horse and an old dog who knew everything before anyone else did. These stories matter to me because you matter to me, the person listening, wherever you are, whatever you are carrying tonight. I hope you put a little of it down before you sleep. I hope the valley goes quiet around you, and the stove is warm, and the evening holds you the way a good story holds you, not by keeping you from the world, but by sending you back into it a little more ready for what it might still have to offer. Until next time, stay honest, stay patient, and don't stand at the fence when you could be crossing the yard.